So you're probably wondering why your CTA review board presentation sucks or is not getting any better. There are many potential reasons, and lucky for you, this is the most effective way to fix it. Here, I will show you how to organize your thoughts, how to quickly start your solution when the timer starts, and most importantly, how to give structure to your board presentation. When you start your board, you're presented with a screen that has the scenario itself in Google Docs. Then you have Google Slides, Google Sheets, and of course Lucidchart. Here's where you begin. So obviously you need to begin with reading the scenario itself. At least read the project overview. You can go a little bit further and go through the general pinpoints, etc., but I would just recommend going and starting with the actual overview / introduction. You should, at that point, switch over to Google Slides, and hopefully you had already selected your template or theme and had a chance to put in the actual title as well as your name. So that actually puts your mind in the right frame so that you can actually start thinking about the scenario and your solution. So there are many ways to structure this, and this is one such way. This is my way. This is the way that I developed and worked for me really well over the years. So this is what I actually recommend to you because it is tried and true. Those who have tried it so far liked it and stuck to it. However, if there's a better way, if there's a different way, if there's another way that you prefer, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Okay. So I start out by pointing out company information. So this is a section in which you don't really get scored, but it is important for the communication section, which is something that you get scored on throughout. So this is very good way to grab the attention of the judges. And there is a structure and there's a method to all of this, by the way. So we start by covering the company, then locations, customers, process, growth, market challenges, and project goals in that particular order. And the way to remember this is by just, mnemonic of the first letters. So you got C, L, C, P, G, M, C, P. Okay? So CLC, PGMCP. CLC, PGMCP. Okay? Can you remember that? I think you can, and that's actually exactly how I've done it. So now you put these things together, and so this is why it's important to actually have read your presentation, your scenario rather, before you get started. So company is something that you can actually just grab this description directly from this scenario itself. Okay, so boom, right here, this is the first sentence, and this is exactly what you can put directly here. Okay, so that's one quick way to get started. Locations, I mean, that's pretty simple as well. It will tell you where they operate. And so, for instance, so sells US, Canada, Spain, and Ireland. Okay, easy enough. This is something that you can actually grab from the scenario as well. Then you move on to customers. So the customers can be B2B or B2C, but we'll get to that in a second. So you can, of course, describe, and this is some other section that you can grab directly from the scenario. And from that, you will be informed as to the type of process that it is. It is B2B, B2C, or both. Okay? So in this case, it's a B2B type of scenario, business to business. The other one is called business to consumer. And now you get to the growth section. So really the growth section, you can grab this from this scenario, and that's actually I did this as one of my later mocks, but now that I think about it, I think there could be a better way. So the quickest thing, so here, see, of course they're looking to expand, blah, 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 but most important words here, the keywords are rapid rate. So you decide for yourself what that rapid rate actually means. So for instance, I'll just put rapid, and let's put 20%. 20% year over year, okay? YOY. You can also put it like this. Okay, so rapid is 20%. You can put something like conservative or slow, conservative would be 5% year over year. If it's something different, like for instance, they're doubling their growth every couple of years, then that's what you can actually put. But at any rate, so in this case, we'll just say rapid at 20%. 20% year over year. You see how I'm a little bit nervous right now because I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say, and I'm actually thinking of the scenario. This is actually what happens on the board, and that's okay. So this is how you can simulate and overcome the nervousness. If you have the typos, nobody's going to judge you on that. That's okay. So that's not part of the communication. This is not a typing exam. This is mostly speaking and presentation exam. Okay, so that's growth. Market. Most of the time it's going to be global. So it could also be regional, it can be national. I don't think it's ever going to be local because we're dealing with big projects here. So you can actually fill this in without even thinking. So most likely it's just going to be global. And again, this is something you'll be able to get from the project overview. So that's why that section is so powerful. And then you get to challenges. So the challenges is, okay, so challenges are like you've done 100 mocks at this point probably, and even if you haven't, you just keep this in mind that the challenges are pretty much the same. So they have you know, different sales processes or service processes, and nothing is standardized, and there's a lot of manual steps to it, manual processes. So they're trying to actually overcome all of that. So challenges are going to be pretty similar. Maybe they're dealing with some old systems as well. So that's something that you can actually put even without thinking. But of course, it helps to actually tie it to the scenario itself, because you will be judged as to how well you understand these requirements and these challenges. And finally, it's the project goals. So the project goals, it's easier to start with the words digital transformation because that's what we're working with here. It's almost always going to be digital transformation. That's the goal of any type of a Salesforce project, especially large-scale Salesforce projects. And at this point, this is where you can actually say digital transformation and tie it back to the requirements. And again, these requirements, you're going to glean that from the project overview section or the introduction section. Okay, so that's basically how you get started. And this will actually give you some kind of tempo, so you'll be able to get going pretty quickly. So that's company information slide. The next slide will be Salesforce strategy. So start out by saying org strategy. That is basically the widest, broadest thing you can start with. And I'd say most of the time it's just going to be a single org. And why is it single org? The justification is usually the same. So due to absence of data residency requirements, and ability to stay within limits such as unification of process. Again, this is something that you're going to write or say so many times you don't even have to think about it. So org strategy, single org. Now there is multi-org, God help you. So multi-org, then you'll also have your justification for that. Okay, now don't forget about mobile. So for internal users, this is something that people mostly forget. You're going to use Salesforce mobile app, unless it's something so weird that you would use some kind of a different app. But most 99.9% of the cases, you're going to use Salesforce mobile app. And also, I would say in the large majority of cases, you're going to use mobile publisher for external users. So you can actually say, start with saying mobile publisher for external users, but do not forget the internal users as well. Documents. So documents refers to document strategy as to what types of tools you're going to use for document generation. So this is usually document generation and e-signature. I love form stack, so that's what I usually go with. Files. What is your file strategy? Are you going to be keeping the files on platform using Salesforce files? Are you going to be staying off platform, or is it a combination of things? So in this case, it's a combination of things, both Salesforce and off platform. And in this particular case, I'm already tying this to the scenario. I got this from the current systems. This is something that obviously you will have to read some more of this scenario to understand which systems are at play here and what they're trying to do. So this is not something you can grab directly from the introduction. I would really doubt that you'll be able to do that. So just have to actually start reading and start understanding. So you're switching between the presentation itself and the text, the scenario. Okay, so if the market is global, okay, this is just pure logic. If the market is global and you're trying to do international trade, so you're going to have multi-currency. Now, what kind of currency? There's two major kinds, right? So there's the basic and advanced. And so the justification for advanced is if you need dated exchange rates. Great. So that will lead you into what you're going to use to enable those dated exchange rates. Is going to be a manual process. Most likely you want to automate that. But so it's important to point out what kind of multi-currency this is. And if you have multi-currency, most likely you're going to want to use multi-language as well, for the same reason as international trade. So then you can talk about what types of language they are, if they are fully supported by Salesforce, or if they are partially supported or unsupported, and so on. And then in your presentation, you can also go and explain how you're going to work with those languages, what are you going to use, translation workbench, Visualforce templates, translate custom labels, the risks associated with that, blah, blah, blah. In this case, it's just, you can say, are you going to enable the multi-currency? What kind? Are you going to enable multi-language and what kind, right? Don't say too much stuff at this stage. And finally, design principles. This is always going to be the same. Always, always, always. In fact, everybody says it. The judges are tired of hearing about it, but nevertheless, it's important to say. So you adhere to the principle of least privilege. You will do buy before build, and you can actually give a reason why for greatest return on investment. So that is something that you're going to remember to say, or you can write it down until you remember how to say it. And of course, no budget constraints. That's everyone's favorite because you can just go crazy and spend as much money as you want on this particular project. In real world, it doesn't happen, but enjoy this fantasy land on the board itself. So those are the things: strategy, mobile, documents, files, multi-currency, multi-language, and design principles. Fair enough? So next will be actors and licenses. So this is something that you're going to want to do right within your sheets. Okay, so in Google Sheets, any table, right? Any table on the board, you're going to want to do in Google Sheets because you automatically get that. And then you just copy paste that into the actual scenario. And if you want to, you can link the table so that if something changes, you can click and update that, and boom, so you already have this updated within the slide. But it's not going to do that automatically. You just have to remember to click here. So we'll talk about the actors and licenses later, but suffice it to say that this is where you can present it, and this is where you also show your reasons. Okay, again, so you see there's some typos here, like license, I is capitalized. Nobody cares. Okay, this is fine. Don't worry about that. Finally, moving on, role hierarchy. So the way that I did this here is I also created this in Google Slides. You need to check with the folks who are running the program right now, the CTA review board, to see if this is allowed or not, because it could be that the rules have changed. So maybe there's you're not given the opportunity to generate this within Sheets anymore, so you're going to have to come up with another way to do it. And we'll cover that at the later videos. So most likely that's going to be done in Lucidchart. Nevertheless, you can just do a screenshot or grab, copy, paste, and so the next is going to be role hierarchy. So what we're covering here is literally the sequence of the slides. Okay, so company information, Salesforce strategy, actors and licenses. Next is role hierarchy. That's what we're here to do. So afterwards, now you have a choice here. So I personally like to insert my diagrams directly into the Google slide. And I would put the system landscape. Now over here, system landscape is large. There is no room to put the word system landscape, but everybody understands exactly what this is. And you're going to say, this is my system landscape. So wonderful. You will do this in Lucidchart, and it's just super simple. You just grab it from Lucidchart, copy paste, and you're good to go. You don't have to do any screenshots, nothing like that. After system landscape, you would put in your integrations table. Now this is optional, but I always say have an integrations table it's great to keep it in one spot. You can flip back and forth between the system landscape and the integrations. Of course, it goes here because you're describing your integrations within the system landscape and pretty much nowhere else. And when it comes to the actual scenario, and we'll also cover that separately, you don't want to put in the whole thing into the scenario, but you would selectively put the various sections for that particular requirement. So you may have a request and reply type situation, and then like this one right here. So it's this one is fire and forget, but there's a remote call-in when the system returns data back into Salesforce. So you could, for instance, grab the header and these first two rows and insert that into the actual scenario. In this case, you'll just put the entire table into Google Slide, and you'll borrow that directly from the actual Google Sheets. So my integrations table actually appears right over here, and that is already in the form of a table, so that's easy to do. So next is data model. Same kind of thing, produce in Google Slide, produce it in Lucidchart, put it into Google Slides. After that, you have LDV. So LDV is yet another tab in Google Sheets. So this is something that you want to create during your presentation. I'll show you how to do this quickly as well. Insert that into the slides. And then following that, you go with the data migration that typically happens towards the end of the actual scenario, if the scenario has sections, or this could happen actually throughout. At any rate, you have it here. It's another diagram you take from Lucidchart, put it into slides, and then you have DevOps. DevOps typically happens at the end, but it doesn't matter where it happens. You'll have it here. Right, so this is it. So now you've got your 11 slides, and that counts the title slide. So really 10 slides. And of course, you can choose to just keep these diagrams directly in Lucidchart. But when you're doing the presentation, you just say something like, my name is Svet Voloshin, and this is Megaprint 2. That's all you gotta say. Don't thank people for being there. I mean, it's kind of assumed. You just spend the least amount of time on the preamble, just go launch into the presentation and say something like, so the reason I choose slides to begin with is because it gives you structure, and then the slides make it possible for you to tell a story without having to even refer to the scenario, and that saves a lot of time. It's like, I haven't looked in this for about a year or so, but I'm gonna just try and give you that presentation right now without actually refreshing my memory of what Megaprint is. So I'll say, so also it's important, you don't have to necessarily read everything, but you can also paraphrase. So Megaprint supplies large format banners for venues. They've been in business for 50 years. They grow by acquisition along the way, and the whole idea is to improve their printing capabilities and of course expand their client base. Their locations are global, primarily in US, Canada, Spain, and Ireland, so we're dealing with North America and Europe. The customers are venues, convention centers, schools, and theaters, so it's really a business-to-business type process. Their growth is rapid at 20% year over year. Market is something that, well, market, I skipped ahead. And challenges, they are lacking, they have too much of a diversity in the sales process, and the technologies that they're using are inhibiting growth. So the project goals will be digital transformation, and they're looking for this project to address scaling issues. So we're moving on to the Salesforce strategy. The org strategy will be a single org due to absence of data residency requirements and ability to stay within limits, as well as unification of processes. For mobile strategy, we will use Salesforce mobile app for internal users and introduce mobile publisher for external users. Documents are going to be generated using form stack documents and e-signature. Files will be kept primarily on Salesforce on platform and then archived off platform, utilizing their existing network drive via computer assistant design system that they also have in place as well. We'll enable multi-currency and multi-language. The multi-currency will be advanced for data exchange rates, and we'll assume that multi-language, actually, the languages are going to be fully supported by Salesforce. Design principles are principle of least privilege for greatest security, buy before build for greatest return on investment, and no budget constraints. As on the side, you can see I'm a bit rusty. I haven't done this in about a year because I don't have to anymore. But I used to be a lot more fluid. So especially if you're in that right frame of mind where you've been just preparing for 3 hours and you've done this so many times, so this rolls off the tongue. So here, actors and licenses, and then you list out, we've got the partner sales representatives, print technicians, blah, blah, blah. These internal actors, I'm giving them Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, because these guys need to access opportunities. These need to have full access to Service Cloud functionalities such as omnichannel, Service Cloud voice, chat, and so on. And this is how they're going to authenticate. Volume is not always known, but in this case, we do know that we have this many. So we're able to calculate the total file volume of 24 terabytes. This is what the org will offer us, and we'll see at which point these files are going to be archived off platform. The role hierarchy is quite traditional, rolling up to the CEO, and then we've got the regional executives for every country. So the same goes for Europe. So we've got the event side of the house, then we've got the print technicians and the sales, as well as external actors such as venue operators and customers who do not fall into the hierarchy because they are customer community users, so they get the customer community license. So here is the system landscape, and then you describe the landscape. Don't spend too much time on this at this stage. You basically say this is Salesforce, this is above the firewall, everything here is in the cloud. Here we're assuming that's going to be on-premise, blah, blah, blah. And we will come back to this section as needed, but in integration tables, you can see we have 11 integrations over here. And moving on to data model, this is actually more important than Google, I'm sorry, not Google slide, but the system landscape. So data model, you just explain what you're doing over here. So you've got your standard objects, custom objects, external objects. Most importantly, default OLWD is private. We have a separate video on data model. We have a separate video on system landscape. So pop a card up ahead, put the top of the screen so you can see that. Okay, moving on. So you can also set the stage and show that you've done your LDV work, and you can get into this when you're describing either, so you've got the LDV calculations, or you're mentioning that you've got the LDV objects during the data model talk or during your data migration stage. At any rate, they'll see that you have done your job and you calculated the LDV. Over here, you do want to only focus on large data volume objects. Nobody cares about the rest of the stuff. So this is why it's important to say what is LDV. Okay, obviously you want to say that there's going to be a full data migration strategy. You're setting the stage, you're not getting into all that detail because you need to tie this to the actual requirements. And finally, DevOps. Okay, so now you set the stage and you told the judges what to expect. So this is the importance of the slides, okay? Otherwise, if you don't do this, you're going to be flipping between the docs. You're going to be flipping between, of course, this, and within the sheets, you're going to have to go and flip between the tabs. So this, I'm actually using strictly the keyboard shortcuts. We can talk about that later. And then, of course, you'll have to go and flip between the various tabs on Lucidchart. So instead of having to do all that, you don't have to put this in the presentation mode. You can just have the screen large enough to show the actual diagrams and the text, and have the slides available so you can actually choose which ones you want to show at any given point. Okay, so it doesn't have to be sequential. So this is the power of the presentation. This is the exact sequence. This is even what you put into each slide, and this should help you. Good luck.